الصدق والسداد والثبات في الأمر يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah. We reached علامات الخفض. قال رحمه الله تعالى: وللخفض 3 علامات: الكسرة والياء والفتحة. علامة أصلية and 3 علامات and 2 علامات فرعية. قال الشيخ محي الدين عبد الحميد رحمه الله: وأقول يمكنك أن تعرف أن الكلمة مخفوضة إذا وجدت فيها واحدا من 3 أشياء. You can know that a word is in a state of خفض, a jar, if it has one of 3 signs. الأول الكسرة وهي الأصل في الخفض، والثاني الياء، والثالث الفتحة، وهما فرعان عن الكسرة. So there's one أصلي sign which is the خفض, that's the default assumption, and there's 2 فرعي ones, the فتحة and the ممنوع من الصرف, as we'll see, and the ياء, which is the typical secondary sign. ولكل واحد من هذه الأشياء 3 مواضع يكون فيها، وسنذكر لك مواضعها تفصيلا فيما يلي. Each has 3 occasions where they occur, and we'll mention their details in that which will come. يلي, that which will be coming. الكسرة ومواضعها. Of course, there's another way of looking at the khafd, which we'll see at the end, al-makhfudat, that why is something, and how does something become in khafd, right? Right? What are the ways something is in khafd? At the end, bab al-makhfudat. باب المخفوضات.
المخفوضات 3 مخفوض بالحرف ومخفوض بالإضافة وتابع للمخفوض.
So المخفوضات 3. Right? المخفوض بالحرف والمخفوض بالإضافة. Something is in a state of خفض or jar, either by the حرف, by حروف الجر, right? Or by إضافة, right? يعني غلام زيد, because of إضافة. And the ثالث is تابع يعني like in the, for example, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So the sifa, the na'at, the na'at, and the tawabi', as we see, are 4 or 5, the things that follow the i'rab of what comes before. So things are in khafd for one of 3 reasons. Because of the huruf al-khafd, idafa, or tawabi', those things that are following the i'rab of something before them. But what is in a state of khafd, this is what he's talking about here. The first is al-kasratu wa mawadi'uha. Yasir bhai, could you read? Loud voice. قال فأما الكسرة.
قال فأما الكسرة فتكون علامة للخفض في 3 مواضع. في الاسم المفرد المنصرف وجمع التكسير المنصرف وجمع المؤنث السالم.
You just have to be careful about the 2 types of hamzas. في الاسم المفرد, right? So the kasra is a sign of khafd in 3 places. The ism mufrad, the singular ism, when it's munsarif. That of course points to what? That the ism al-mufrad can be munsarif or غير munsarif. Right? And we'll see that in a moment. وجمع التكسير المنصرف, the broken plural, Al-Munsarif meaning the broken plural as well, could be Munsarif, could be non-Munsarif. وجمع المؤنث السالم, right? And the which is what is the other name for جمع المؤنث السالم? There's a missing word. ما جمع بألف وتاء مزيدتين. Okay, that which is in a جمع with ألف and تاء that are additional. جمع المؤنث السالم. But we've discussed that before. So he says, رحمه الله, قال الشارح رحمه الله, أقول للكسرة ثلاثة مواضع تكون في كل واحد منها علامة على أن الاسم مخفوض. So there's three places where the sign of jar is, the sign of خفض is the كسرة. الموضع الأول في الاسم المفرد المنصرف. In the ism mufrad, that is munsarif. Now, something being munsarif indicates that it would take tanween in the indefinite. And the default is that an ism that has full isminess and that has the full quality, that is mutamakkin fil ismiyya, and that has full characteristics of an ism, the basis is that it should be munsarif. Unless there are causes, right? And that will be coming. But the default is that an ism should be munsarif. وَمَنْ كَانَ غَيْرَ مُنصَرِفْ فَهُوَ عَلَى خِلَافِ الْأَصْلِ. What is not munsarif is the exception. A likely place, as we will see, where an ism could be غير munsarif is definite nouns, right? Is when something is alam, right? Because you need two illas for two causes for something to typically, or one illah that takes the place of two illas, two causes for something to be mamnu' min as-sarf. Names have one illah by default, right? So arguably the two most common causes of al-man' min as-sarf are female names and foreign names. That's the most common. Female names that have a female form, mamnu' min as-sarf. Foreign names, mamnu' min as-sarf. Which is why, how many prophets are mentioned in the Quran?
23.
25. 25. Only 4 of those are munsarif. Because they're a name and they're foreign. ممنوع من الصرف. إبراهيم وإسحاق ويعقوب. All besides is 4. Right? Hud, Salih, right? And there's ikhtilaf on others. So there are words that there's ikhtilaf. Is it mamnu' min as-sarf or not? Right? And sometimes and that's why. But knowing principles is important because, for example, Rajab. There are 2 madahib on Rajab of his man' min as-sarf. But are you talking about an individual or are you talking about the month? Okay? And there's, but that's where understanding the principles, otherwise you're out to sea. And if you're out to sea, you're not really talib ilm, you're just like a surfer. If that. So the ism al-mufrad al-munsarif, he says, وَقَدْ عَرَفْتَ مَعْنَى كَوْنِهِ مُفْرَدًا. Right? We've already taken the meaning of it being mufrad, singular. Okay? Mufrad. What form is it from? Af'ala. Good. Afrada is to make something one. Fadl, singular. Right? أفرد يفرد إفرادا فهو مفرد وهذا مفرد. It's something that has been affirmed to be one. It's singular. Right? So we've already taken what that is, right? And the scholars define what is the mufrad? How do they define the mufrad? No, in Arabic. Right? What's the mufrad? He defined it. It's ما ليس مثنى ولا مجموعا. So it's an ism that's neither dual nor plural. ولا ملحقا بالمثنى أو المجموع, right? Or nor that which is considered with the muthanna and the majmu'. Revise. So that's mufrad. What is وَمَعْنَى كَوْنِهِ مُنصَرِفًا? Right, the meaning of it being munsarif, أن الصرف يلحق آخره. That sarf affects its ending. والصرف هو التنوين. And what's meant by sarf is tanween. That's why that type of tanween, we saw that there are 4 types of tanween. That tanween is called tanween al-Tamkeen. There's 4 types of tanween. Tanween al-Tamkeen, tanween al-Tankir, tanween al-Iwad, etc. Tanween al-Tamkeen, the firm tamkeen indicates something is mutamakkin fi bab al-ismiyya. It is very clearly an ism, that the causes of, that gives it a non-ism state are out. And we'll look at that in a second. What are examples of that? Nahu سعيت إلى محمد. Right? I went towards Muhammad. And sa'a often conveys the meaning of ihtimam and qasd. Right? Of what's dhahaba is similar to go, but sa'a has a sense of deliberateness, purpose, resolve, frequently. Right? To direct yourself to it. كل الناس يسعى. All people strive, or go forth, right, etc. It's mentioned in the Quran in that sense. وَنَحْوُ رَضِيتُ عَنْ عَلِيٍّ. I was pleased with Ali. وَنَحْوُ استفدت من معاشرة خالد. استفدت, I benefited. Right? This is the istaf'ala pattern. It indicates seeking or attaining a meaning. Here, I attained benefit. Fa'ida, right? From mu'ashara, from my keeping the company of. Ashara yu'ashiru. Mu'asharatan. Mu'asharati Khalidin. So Khalidin here is, because it takes tanween, is ism mufrad munsarif. وَنَحْوُ أَعْجَبَنِي خُلُقُ بَكْرٍ. أعجب, again, is أفعل pattern. عجب, right, is to have wonder or amazement, right? A'jaba is to impress another. A'jabani, I was impressed with his khuluq. Khuluqu, so his khuluq impressed me. A'jabani, this is the maf'ul for the fa'il, which is khuluq. A'jabani, khuluqu Bakr. Bakr's, but Bakr is مضاف إليه, so it's مجرور بالإضافة, right? The fact that it takes tanween indicates that it is اسم مفرد منصرف, right? As opposed to how would you say, what's the name that's غير منصرف?
حمزة.
Hamza, for example. Right? How would you say it for Hamza? Yeah, عجبني خلق حمزة. Right? فكل من محمد وعلي مخفوض لدخول حرف الخفض عليه. Each of these is in a state of خفض. Muhammad and Ali, a state of خفض, jar, because of the particle of خفض entering upon it. وعلامة خفضه الكسرة الظاهرة. And the sign of it being خفض is the explicit كسرة. وكل من خالد وبكر كل من خالد وبكر مخفوض لإضافة ما قبله إليه. And Khalid and Bakr are in خفض because of إضافة of what is before it to them. وعلامة خفضه الكسرة الظاهرة أيضا. And it being in خفض, the sign of it being in خفض is the كسرة at the end. This is إعراب معنوي rather than لفظي. ومحمد وعلي وخالد وبكر أسماء مفردة. They're all اسم مفرد وهي منصرفة, and they're all منصرف أي تقبل التنوين. They accept تنوين للحوق التنوين لها, because the tanween comes upon them. And of course this is subject to a discussion that is coming ahead. So what is it that prevents tanween? That's coming. When we look at when fatha takes the place of the kasra. والموضع الثاني جمع التكسير المنصرف. جمع التكسير when it is منصرف. وقد عرفت مما سبق معنى جمع التكسير. From what's preceded, you know what's the meaning of جمع التكسير. And here, you know, the smart student, the diligent student or the smart student? The diligent because they, you know, would put the definition here. Either because they know it, so they confirm the understanding, they write it down because they know it, or they look it up. And also the self-respecting student would do that, because if you're asked in class, what is Jam'a Taksir? If you know it, on the spot you might forget it, so it's there in front of you. You don't have to go look for it. And if you don't know it yet, if you've written it down, you know, المرء لا يفضح نفسه. A person does not shame themselves. So that's, of course, a hint for the future. I'm not an optimist when it comes to people learning things. So we've taken what the definition of the Jam'a Taksir is, right? The broken plural. We also took, there are six ways that something is broken, right? وقد عرفت في الموضع الأول هنا معنى كونه منصرفا. And when we looked at the ism mufrad, we saw what being munsarif means. It takes tanween. وذلك نحو مررت برجال كرام. I passed by noble men. رجال كرام. Why is so رجال, why is it in a state of jar? Why is رجال in a state of jar? Yasir, right? Yeah, because of the harf of khaf, because of the ba. Yeah. And then kiramin, why is it in jar? Why is it in jar? Yeah, it's a na'at, which is one of the tawabi. Right? And they're both taking tanween, they're both jam'a taksir, and the alama of their being in jar is the kasra, and the sign that they're munsarif is that they both take tanween. Right? So he'll explain that, right? ونحن رضيت عن أصحاب لنا شجعانا. عن أصحاب لنا شجعان. I am well pleased with عن أصحاب لنا, of some companions of ours, شجعان, who are very brave. The fu'lan pattern indicates extensiveness of the meaning, right? So فكل من رجال وأصحاب مخفوض لدخول حرف الخفض عليه. So رجال and أصحاب is in خفض because of the حرف الخفض, the ba and the an entering upon them. وعلامة خفضه الكسرة الظاهرة. The sign of their being in خفض is the explicit كسرة. وكل من كرام وشجعان مخفوض لأنه نعت للمفعول. And kiram and shuj'an in the two examples are in jar because they are not for something in a state of khafd. وعلامة خفضه الكسرة الظاهرة. أيضا their sign of being khafd is the explicit كسرة. ورجال وأصحاب وكرام وشجعان جموع التكسير. And these are all جمع تكسير وهي منصرفة, and they're all منصرف للحوق التنوين لها, because of the tanween entering upon them. If that is the case. Now, of course, in Arabic books, you cannot rely on the tashkil, because you don't know who did it and what they did with what they did. Right? Sheikh, if you want, entertainment or tragedy, follow Sheikh Badib on Telegram. Right? Book published with an alleged editor who's totally unknown by a publishing house, and they took not only someone else's critical edition, but they published the other guy's foreword, and they published it. They didn't even redo the typesetting. They just took the whole book. They just changed the name in the foreword from the original editor to this editor. Same editing, and they just reprinted it with someone else's tahqiq. Different publishing house, they changed the colors, but same typesetting even. Same forward, say something different. So you can't, flowery things, another thing is on this, there's a bunch of scholars and academics who have this, there's a WhatsApp group started by Dr. Mahmoud al-Masri about best editions of something. So someone asked, that is this a good edition? And oof, miskeen. And allegedly it's a good scholar, but an elderly man did an edition of a dictionary, praised it, 15 makhtutat, it's based on this and that, and he got a rhetorical whipping. Because even the foreword was basically, they took 4 or 5 editions and they pieced together the foreword without any attribution. And they did not rely on any of the manuscript, they just made up their own thing. Footnotes have nothing to do with anything. It's a disaster zone. So that's why you have to be very careful. So you can never rely, you can't say, oh, there's a kasra here, so therefore, no. You have to have your grammatical tools awake. And when possible, unless it's an exceptionally good publishing house, try to get editions that don't have tashkil. Because most of one, it dumbs you down. It's not good to be dumb. And number 2, you can't rely on it anyways. That's the second. جمع التكسير المنصرف. الموضع الثالث جمع المؤنث السالم. Right? The sound female plural. وقد عرفت مما سبق معنى جمع المؤنث السالم. And we've taken the meaning of جمع المؤنث السالم. ما جمع بألف وتاء مزيدتين. And that's what. It doesn't have to be mu'annath, and it's not always salim. But this is used as a laqab, is a title for it, so it's excusable. وذلك نحو نظرت إلى فتيات مؤدبات. I looked towards 2 young women, فتيات مؤدبات, who are characterized by good adab. مؤدبات, مؤدب is أدب يؤدب, فهو تأديبا فهو مؤدب, وذاك مؤدب. female will be مؤدبة or مؤدبات. To be مؤدب has many indications. To be مؤدب, question arises, who or what is the مؤدب? Okay? And to be مؤدب, to be characterized by adab, is أدب, someone engaged in instilling of adab. يؤدب تأديبا, right? There's a process. So who is the مؤدب and who is مؤدب? Right? So indicate, and they say إنما يؤخذ الأدب من المتأدبين. Adab is only taken from people who have adab. And we have many resources and seekers, a number of resources from, let's say, Muhammad Naqib al-Attas on the centrality of adab in religion. And he gives a very comprehensive definition of adab. Right? That adab is not, has manifestations, but its core reality is a concern, an attitude that is manifest in the right, in the right, is an inward concern that manifests the right attitude, states and actions, and the right responses in each circumstance through. So the right actions and responses in attitude, character, and conduct. So adab is a trait of character that has inward and outward manifestations in action and response in words and deeds. Right? And he talks about ilm, right? Education has three components. It's very insightful. Right? We've done a couple of things on Seekers related to that, especially related to children's education. There's the notion of tarbiyah, the notion of ta'deeb, and ta'leem comes third. Tarbiyah, that's the broad plan. Tarbiyah is to take something stage by stage towards its ultimate good. Right? Rabba yurabbi, right? Is the nurturing, is the purposeful nurturing toward desired outcomes, desired or praiseworthy outcomes. That's tarbiyah, and that's the roadmap of education. What outcomes are you seeking from it? And tarbiyah is the gradual nurturing towards those desirable outcomes. So that's the big picture of education. Okay. Just the instilling, the attainment of closeness, the instilling of virtue, and the removal of their opposites, etc. Then, that's the big picture. What is the active effort, the micro effort required for the bigger picture of tarbiyah, like the ongoing effort? That's ta'deeb, which is the restraining, right, and the correcting, and the inspiration and guiding. Right? Ta'deeb is the instilling of adab, disciplining. But our notion of disciplining is the instilling of adab, the instilling of that concern within that would cause one to manifest the right attitude, character, and conduct in word and deed, in action and response. Right? So what is the purpose of ta'deeb, of correcting, of refining, of telling do this, don't do this? It is not punitive. It is not policing. So it's not about being judge or jury or police or jailer, although many parents think that they are one of those, but rather it is ta'deeb. Ta'deeb. The instilling of adab. And the sign of the instilling of adab is what would the mu'addab do in the absence of the mu'addib? They would act and respond in accordance with adab. That's a sign that the adab has been instilled. But the adab with the shaykh is how you conduct yourself in the shaykh's absence. That means that the adab has been instilled. That's the second level. And how can you have tarbiyah and ta'deeb? That's the third component, which is ilm, which is ta'aleem, the conveying of knowledge. Right? So you have a muallim and a muta'allim, a teacher and a student. Right? And that act of learning, ta'aleem, that is the wasila لتحقيق التأديب والتربية. That's a means to the attainment of ta'deeb and tarbiyah. كل يعني نظرت إلى فتيات مؤدبات. I looked towards young women who had good adab. ونحن رضيت عن مسلمات قانتات. I was well pleased with women who were penitent. قانتات. Qunut is a very rich word, has a whole number of meanings. Right? It's worth looking up. And qunut with a ta is very different from qunut with a ta, which is despair. And they both have to do with a type of yearning and a type of turning. But practically when it comes to primary text, because words have such rich, qunut refers to the dua. For example, there's a dua al-qunut, but also the Prophet ﷺ said, أفضل الصلاة طول القنوت. The best of prayer is lengthy standing or lengthy recitation. Now, what's the relationship between these meanings? The dua or recitation or standing, or to be qanit, to be devoted, or to be yearning. A whole range of meanings of the same root. Now you just say, okay, I have 6 different possible meanings. But why? That is an exercise in digging for meanings, right? But qunut is a very important word. It has many religious implications. قانتين. فكل من فتيات ومسلمات مخفوض. So each of فتيات and muslimat is in خفض لدخول حرف الخفض عليه. If the حرف الخفض enters into it, وعلامة خفضه الكسرة الظاهرة. The sign of it being خفض is the explicit كسرة. وكل من مؤدبات وقانتات مخفوض. Both مؤدبات and قانتات is مخفوض لأنه تابع للمخفوض, because it follows the مخفوض. وعلامة خفضه الكسرة الظاهرة أيضا, and its sign of being in خفض is the explicit كسرة. وكل من فتيات ومسلمات مؤدبات وقانتات جمع مؤنث سالم. Right? And each of these is جمع مؤنث سالم. He doesn't go into sarf or non-sarf. Why? Because is there a جمع مؤنث سالم غير منصرف? So here, of course, Shaykh Muhyiddin Abdul Hamid brings in the concepts of the later chapter, right, on the types of khafd. But it's a good thing. Here, as a talib ilm, one should cross-reference. Unzur, and you can put the ra for unzur. And unzur, page such and such, which is what's called babul. What's at the end of the Ajrumiyya? Yeah, of the makhfudat. Yeah, makhfudat al-asma. Babu makhfudat al-asma. Let's make a quick chart. There are 3. مخفوض بالحرف, مخفوض بالإضافة, مخفوض بالتبعية. Right? التابع للمخفوض. That's the way he puts it, right? We just put that because, and all the explanation here, Shaykh Muhyiddin Abdul Hamid integrates those three categories in his examples and in his explanations. But that's where it's important to make cross-references. It's also important that most students of knowledge treat subjects as if it's a murder mystery. Like some serial. What's going to happen next? Oh my God, we've reached the Nawasib. No, read ahead. Right, read ahead. Imam al-Juwayni, by the time he finished one book in Usul al-Fiqh under his teacher, had read 200 books in the subject. Right? Imam al-Jurjani, is it Jurjani? One of the two adversaries, either Taftazani or Jurjani. I think it's al-Jurjani. Before he went to the commentator on the Shamsiyya, he had read the Shamsiyya with its commentary 14 times. He'd already done 2 sets of notes on it before covering it with the author. Right? Of course, how do you do that? You consult what to do. Right? And diligent students would do that before starting a subject. Say, okay, we'll be studying this 6 months from now. What do you advise that I be reading in advance? Okay? So you get to it prepared. But in a text that you're studying that is of an understandable level, one should be reading ahead, prepared. So and also thinking, what does this relate to? Okay? Allah. So then he has questions, and then he has niyabatul ya anil kasra. When does the ya take place of the kasra? Right? Sidi Umar, قال
قال الشيخ رحمه الله تعالى قال وأما الياء فتكون علامة للخفض في ثلاث
قال المؤلف.
قال المؤلف رحمه الله تعالى وأما الياء فتكون علامة للخفض في 3 مواضع في الأسماء الخمسة وفي التثنية والجمع.
Okay, so the fatha is a sign of khafd in the asma' al-khamsa that we've taken, and the tathniya and the jama'. Here, even when you're looking at a commentary, before the sign that you know it, because we've taken the asma' al-khamsa, so we put a thing, what are they? And you need to recap means there's a review deficit. The tathniya, the muthanna, al-jama', which jama' would it be talking about? Right? Am I clear about that? Right? So the commentator says, رحمه الله وأقول للياء ثلاثة مواضع تكون في كل واحد منها دالة على أن الاسم مخفوض. 3 places where the ya indicates خفض. And you say, of course, the ism is مخفوض. Why? Because when is the fi'l مخفوض? When is the fi'l مخفوض? Never. The fi'l is never مخفوض. Okay? The ism and the fi'l share 2 grammatical states, which are? رفع النصب. خفض is unique to asma, jazm is unique to certain af'al. As we'll see. الموضوع الأول الأسماء الخمسة وقد عرفتها. What are the أسماء الخمسة?
أبوك وأخوك وحموك وأخوك.
Yeah, أبوك. This, of course, and it's completely fine to say أبوك أخوك وحموك وأخوك ذو مال, but say the adab in a dars is say أبوه وأخوه وحموك, because when you're addressing the teacher, you say لا أبوك أنت, right? It just from the, but you just want to. There's nothing wrong with it. Now, some parts of the world, like the Damascus, are very prickly when it comes to adab, right? Like there's There's some people who joke that the Damascans have bad adab when it comes to having good adab, right? They'll be picky on everything, even how you make the tea, right? And they won't be fair about it. Others, Mauritanians, they're desert people. The student will sit with his feet at the face of the sheikh. In Damascus, even a common person would have a heart attack if they saw that. But there, like, you have these pictures of student sitting with his hand behind his head and his feet crossed, foot pointing towards Murabat al-Hajj's face. It's adi. Right? So they're different adab, right? في الأسماء الخمسة, right? It says وقد عرفتها, and you know أبوك وحموك وأخوك وذو مال. وعرفت شروط إعرابها مما سبق. There are 4 conditions for the أسماء الخمسة to have the إعراب بالحروف, right? بالضمة والألف والياء والواو والألف والياء. What are the 4 conditions for the أسماء الخمسة to behave in this way? Sir?
مضاف.
No. Logically.
مفرد.
They're مفرد, مكبر, مضاف إلى غير ياء المتكلم. Okay? They're مفرد. It's singular, so it's not plural. It's مكبر, so it's not diminutive. مضاف in a state of إضافة, and the إضافة is not to ياء المتكلم, like أبي. Right? Okay. So when he mentions it, like you've taken it, it's good to put the page number, but to do a quick summary for oneself, that consolidates knowledge, right? وذلك نحو سلم على أبيك صباح كل يوم. سلم, سلم, to engage in salam. على أبيك, على حرف جر, أبيك مجرور بالياء من الأسماء الخمسة. صباح كل يوم, right? Give salam to your father the morning of each day. ونحو لا ترفع صوتك على صوت أخيك الأكبر. Don't raise your voice over the voice of صوت أخيك. Okay? Here it's مجرور بالإضافة. Okay? And it's من الأسماء الخمسة, so the sign of it being in jar is the ya. الأكبر, it's a مضاف إليه, it's a مضاف ثاني, and it's sign of its being in jar is the kasra at the end factor. But the shahid is أخيك. ونحو لا تكن محبا لذي المال إلا أن يكون مؤدبا. Do not love the one who has wealth. ذي مال is in khafd because of what? Because of harf al-jar, the lam. ذي مال, the lam. إلا أن يكون مؤدبا, unless they are a person of adab. Of course, there's hadiths warning against this, right? فكل من أبيك وأخيك وذي المال, so each of these مخفوض are لدخول حرف الخفض عليه. So in the state of خفض because of a حرف خفض, وعلامة خفضه الياء, and the sign of it being خفض is the ياء. والكاف في الأولين ضمير الخطاب. The kaf in the first two, أبيك وأخيك, is a ضمير of the ضمير المخاطب, of the ضمير for the one addressed. وهي مضاف إليه مبني على الفتح, and it's مضاف إليه مبني على الفتح في محل خفض, in a place of being in خفض. So he puts in, this is a new thing that he's bringing in, right? That, so for example, what's the first example? يسلم على أبيك, right? So على is حرف خفض, أبي is مخفوض بحرف الخفض, علامة خفضه الياء. But then there's this kaf. The kaf is what? The kaf, the kaf of khitab, abika or abiki for the case of a woman, right? This is the ضمير المخاطب, the ضمير relating to the مخاطب. Now the ضمائر, this kind of ضمير, it's مبني. So it's مضاف إليه, but it's مبني. So the مبني, can it take إعراب? No. But it takes a place of إعراب because it's مضاف إليه, but it's مبني على الفتح في محل خفض. Right? So these are things, these are concepts that come along during the study of the Sharh of the Ajrumiyya. So here you say new concept. Right? So he introduces this concept of how does the ضمير المخاطب, for example, work. So you make a note of that this is the i'rab of it. And if you do the exercises, you will see other examples of the ضمير المخاطب. Same thing would apply if it was abiki, abikuma, abikum, etc. Right? The same thing would apply. And it's fi mahalli khafd because it takes the place, so that it's mabni, so this ضمير is mabni on such and such, but it takes the place of the grammatical places في محل خفض because it is مضاف إليه. وكلمة المال, right? على, the second example, لا تكن محبا لذي المال في المثال الثالث مضاف إليه, is مضاف إليه as well. مجرور بالكسرة الظاهرة, right? Or مخفوض بالكسرة الظاهرة. So he's using both terms, right? And also showing that the grammarian sometimes slack off. Because if you're sticking to إعراب معنوي, what would you say? That كلمة المال في المثال الثالث مضاف إليه أيضا مجرور. And what's the full way of saying it?
وعلامته
No, علامة وعلامة جره الكسرة الظاهرة في آخره. Right? Right? But sometimes they'll do it just because we've already said it several times, so it's اكتفاء. We take it. يعني مجرور بالكسرة أي مجرور وعلامة جره كذا وكذا, but to avoid repetitiveness. الموضع الثالث, the third place where the kasra takes the place of, the ya takes the place of the kasra is al-muthanna, is the dual. وذلك نحو انظر إلى الجنديين, إلى الجنديين, look at the two soldiers. The jundi, the jund, right, is an army or a pack of people, right? Is those people who are gathered together, right? The hadith related to يوم الأسد, الأرواح جنود مجندة, right? The souls were in parties, arranged, right, or brought together, مجند, right? فما تعارف منها تلف. So those who came to know each other on that day, ائتلف, they found ulfa amongst each other. وما تناكر منها اختلف. And those who did not know each other on that day, or they did not get along on that day, but two possibilities at least, possibly more, اختلف, will differ in this life. The hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, but again, even a word you kind of know, jund, I know what it means. No, not necessarily. Look up words, because jund Like, how does, why does an army or army, a group within an army, are they called jund? Why, right? And why is an individual called jundi? What makes an army an army? Right? What's the root? What's the meaning of the root? That's why spending time with dictionaries, Mukhtar al-Sihah, al-Misbah al-Munir, getting familiar with Maqayis al-Lugha, Ibn Faris, etc. This is critical to cultivating one's Arabic. وَكُلٌّ, right? So he says, سلم على الصديقين. Greet the two friends. فكل من الجنديين والصديقين مخفوض. Both of these are dual words in خفض. لدخول حرف الخفض عليه. Because the harf of خفض enters upon them. وعلامة خفضه, the sign of their being in خفض, الياء المفتوح ما قبلها المكسور ما بعدها, is, because it's the dual, the sign of it being in خفض is a ya with a fatha before and a kasra after. وكل من الجنديين والصديقين مثنى. Both of them are مثنى dual لأنه دال على اثنين, because both indicate the dual. Right? And you can replace it by saying A plus B. Okay? You can say سلم على الصديق والصديق. You could remove the dual part and say A plus A. Right? That's a sign of it being dual. Right? انظر إلى الجندي والجندي. Right? And we took that when we looked at the dual earlier. الموضع الثالث, the third place. جمع المذكر السالم نحو رضيت عن البكرين. Right? I was pleased with the Bakrs. Strange thing to say. ونحو نظرت إلى المسلمين الخاشعين. I looked towards the reverent believers. Right? And of course one should distinguish between things like خشع and خضع. Khushu' and khudu', they're similar. They're both states of humbleness, but they're distinct. These are qualities a believer should strive to have, right? Khashi'een, khadi'een, right? This is فكل من البكرين والمسلمين مخفوض. So بكرين and Muslimin are مخفوض لدخول حرف الخفض عليه, because a particle of خفض entered them. وعلامة خفضه الياء, the sign of them being in خفض is the ياء. الياء المكسور ما قبلها, with a kasra before it, المفتوح ما بعدها, because it's جمع مذكر سالم, not dual. So the difference between جمع مذكر salim and جمع and the تثنية can be subtle. You need to be able to tell from the context. Or the related ضميرs and so on in the sentence. وكل منهما جمع مذكر سالم, and each of them is جمع مذكر سالم. So this is the second of the signs, right? The ya in place of the kasra as a sign of the khafd. And this one's pretty straightforward. الأسماء الخمسة تثنية and جمع. The issue of them being in, ممنوع من الصرف or not, does not arise here. So of course make you wonder why. نيابة الفتحة عن الكسرة. Now we get to fun time. This is, right? Now, does someone have fiqh في النحو? Right? Say, what are the signs of rafa? Like a parrot could tell you that. Right? There's no merit in that kind of law. Right? الفقه فهم ما دق. Fiqh is knowing subtleties. Right? Right? thinking. Right? Right? It's a man min sha'nihi an ya'qil. The one whose characteristic is that they think. But what is thinking? Right? Thinking is structured. Right? That which is structured, it's principled. Right? They have tools of thinking. Without tools, we are fools, as Uncle Rabbani would say. Right? So, and that's the purpose of knowledge. Right? That's why they refer to it as arts and science, but it's technically science and arts. Okay? Science are the principles of a subject, and the art is how you apply those principles. نيابة الفتحة عن الكسرة. The kasra, the fatha taking place of the kasra.
قال المصنف رحمه الله وأما الفتحة فتكون علامة للخفض في الاسم الذي لا ينصرف.
The fatha replaces the default, which is the kasra, as the sign of khafd in one case, which is al-ism alladhi la yansarif, al-mamnu'u min as-sarf. Right? It has several names, most famous, al-ism alladhi la yansarif, al-mamnu'u min as-sarf. Right? That which does not take tanween at the end. Right? Sarf, which it says, it refers to its taking off tanween. This is summarized in one line of poetry, right? So, which we'll come to. قال الشارح رحمه الله أقول للفتحة موضع واحد تكون فيه علامة على خفض الاسم. And the fatha is a sign of khafd in one place. وهو الاسم الذي لا ينصرف. In the اسم الذي لا ينصرف, in the name that does not take tanween at the end. ومعنى كونه لا ينصرف أنه لا يقبل الصرف وهو التنوين. Just reiterating the same thing. والاسم الذي لا ينصرف. So why is an ism غير منصرف? And well, now the Arabs spoke that way. So, and if you don't know why something is the way it is, safe thing to say that مبنى اللغة على السماع وهكذا سمع من كلام العرب. Right? There's sometimes intelligent non-answers that are generally convincing. I had a friend of mine who was teaching at a Tablighi masjid in Amman. He studied Hanafi fiqh. Most of the congregants were Salafi. And he's getting really overwhelmed. Every day he's teaching, so I said, إيش الدليل على هذا? What's the proof for this? I said, look, take a comprehensive principle, right? Which is that you tell them الأصل في المسلم and أنه عبد لله. The basis of the Muslim is that they're a servant of Allah. يعني والعبد مأمور باتباع القرآن والسنة. The servant is commanded to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. والمذهب is منهج لفهم القرآن والسنة. And the madhab is a method to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. Each of the positions فقول الأئمة في مسألة من مسائل مأخوذة من القرآن والسنة. So any position of the Imams on any issue is taken from the Quran and the Sunnah. Right? صريحا أو دلالة, explicitly or from what's understood from it. وتفصيله مبسوط في المطولات. And the details of this are found in the larger texts. And you can mention a whole bunch of books. That's whoever wants to, they can go and look in them. Now the common person said, oh, this is from the Quran and Sunnah? Yes. and it sounds fancy, they'll be like, what do you mean? Right? But it gives them a principle. Right? You give them a principle, sallallahu barak. But sometimes you don't know the answer, right? Now, you still give them something that's beneficial. But this is a beneficial principle. So similarly, when you don't know, why is there mamnu' min as-sarf? Now you should know the specific reason, which you'll tell us. You say, هكذا تكلم العرب. But you can put a few principles. الأصل في اللغة, this. And the rulings of Nahu are basically a method of describing kalam al-Arab. Of course, that's shallow because it's missing the specific reason, right? But it is a sound answer. So معنى كونه لا ينصرف. What does it mean that it's غير منصرف؟ أنه لا يقبل الصرف وهو التنوين. Right? It doesn't take tanween. So والاسم الذي لا ينصرف, why is it غير منصرف? Right? So you could technically put سبب كونه ممنوعا من الصرف. Right? Why is it ممنوع من الصرف? And this is significant. هو الذي أشبه الفعل في وجود علتين فرعيتين. Right? That something happened to this ism that, so if we step back, something takes tanween, but in the general case, there are secondary reasons for something taking tanween, right? Which are tanween al-tankir, tanween al-iwad, tanween al-muqabala. Those are secondary reasons. We took those 4 reasons. It should be clear in one's head. But the default reason is something is firmly an ism. Now, some things can happen to an ism that make it have a point of resemblance to a fi'l. So, it then becomes mamnu' min as-sarf. What are those things that affect an ism so that it has points of resemblance to a fi'l? There are multiple causes which he will list. If 2 of these illas, 2 of these causes that prevent tanween are found, each of them are meanings that, by the principles of language, give that ism a point of resemblance to af'al, causes it. If 2 causes are found, it becomes mamnu' min as-sarf. Or a comprehensive cause that takes the place of 2. Right? So he says, وَالِاسْمُ الَّذِي لَا يَنْصَرِفْ هُوَ الَّذِي أَشْبَهَ الْفِعْلِ, is the one that resembles the fi'l في وجود علتين فرعيتين, in the presence, for having two secondary causes of علتين, 2 causes of prevention of sarf, or 2 causes of resemblance to a fi'l. إحداهما ترجع إلى اللفظ, one returning to the lafz, والأخرى ترجع إلى المعنى, and the other returning to the meaning. So you can diagram that. الممنوع من الصرف, it has 2 illas, one returning to the lafz, one returning to the ma'na. Okay? Or, long line, one comprehensive illah that takes the place of 2. Right? So 4 right? So he tells us والعلل التي توجد في الاسم وتدل على الفرعية وهي راجعة إلى المعنى 2. Those causes of prevention of sarf that can be found in the ism, and they indicate derivative far'iyya, the derivative meaning returning to the meaning of the word because it returns to al-ma'na or al-lafz are two. ليس غير, only. Al-Alamiyya, it being a alam. And he'll tell us what a alam is, meaning it's a definite name. It's a name of something. Right? So Hamza, Zayn, Yusuf, right? Etc. وثاني الوصفية, right? Something being a wasf. And he'll explain each of these one by one. Right? ولا بد من وجود واحدة من هاتين العلتين في الاسم الممنوع. One of these is required in the ism that is الممنوع من الصرف بسبب وجود علتين فيه. That if something is ممنوع من الصرف because of two derivative causes, then you have to have one returning to the word and one returning to the meaning. So basically there's two ways something can be mamnu' min as-sarf. Either two derivative causes, there one must return to the lafz and one return to the meaning. Or one comprehensive cause, which we'll be seeing. Okay? والعلل التي توجد في الاسم وتدل على الفرعية وتكون راجعة إلى اللفظ ست. So these two return to the meaning. These two return to the meaning, and those that return to the type of word are 6. So the total 9 causes. 2 that return to the meaning, 6 that return to the word, and these relate to the ones that require 2 illahs. And there's one mega cause, which if found is mamnu' min as-sarf, and we'll see that next. So that's why sometimes you'll see the mamnu' min as-sarf. How many illahs are there? Some will mention 8, focusing on the general case, which are you need 2 causes, one returning to the lafz, and there's 2, al-Alamiyya or al-Wasfiyya. One returning to the meaning, Alamiyya or Wasfiyya, and 1 of 6 returning to the type of word. Right? That الراجع لللفظ 6 علل وهي التأنيث بغير ألف, is to be feminine without an alif. Right? والعجمة, or to be foreign, to be a foreign word. Right? So it's not originally Arab. Right? Like za'faran, or many, or more simply, right? Like Persian names, for example, right? And some of them there's difference on. But what's a Persian name? Farishta, for example, right? Farishta, right? Ibn Malak is one of his, I think, father or grandfather name was Farishta, so he's known as Ibn Malak. Farishta, his angel. Or we'll see examples, right? Rujma, of a foreign word. David. Ja'a Davidu Paul. Right? I have a friend of mine, he had to fill in a marriage form in Jordan. He was refusing to finish. He said, I've learned that a believer is an honored being. I'm not going to write my name in Arabic. I refuse. So he left the ministry. There's no way I'm going to write it in English. We do our documents in Arabic. I refuse. Then he went and found out how he could write it without putting it with a ba. He says, okay, I can use a ba. But that's not an Arabic letter. He refused. It's not. Right? So I had to say, look, it's with a dhamma. Bool, it's not a bawl. And you're kidding. Just do it. Because he needed the form to get a house, etc. So, anyways. Al-Ujma, a foreign name, Paul, right? Paul, or Mary, right? Etc. At-Tarkib, right? And we'll look at each of these because he'll give examples. وَزِيَادَةُ أَلِفٍ وَنُونٍ, right? Tarkib is like Hadramaut, right? Or many, or the Hanafi Faqih, Qadi Khan. It's a murakkab, right? Right? Ba'la Bak, right? Which is Ba'al plus Bak. Ba'al was an Arab idol. Okay? And Bak means respected. Like Shakir Bak al-Hanbali. It's actually not Hanbali, it's Hanafi. زيادة الألف والنون, addition of alif and noon at the end. وزن الفعل, like أحمل. العدل, right? And he'll give examples of these. Al-Adl, when the word is originally considered to have had a different form, right? Like Umar, for example, right? Like Umar, right? Allah. So ولا بد من وجود واحدة من هذه العلل مع وجود العالمية فيه. One of these علل is one of these causes is required with the present of it being علم. وأما مع الوصفية, as for with something having this characteristic of being a wasf, only three causes arise when the wasf acts as a مانع من الصرف. فلا يوجد منها إلا واحدة من ثلاث, وهي زيادة الألف والنون أو وزن الفعل أو العدل. And we'll see examples of these. So you can diagram this. Like you can diagram this, but it's very important to have this very clear. At a simple level, broadly, you need one cause returning to the type of, to the meaning, and one cause returning to the type of word, to the lafz. If you have A plus B, it's mamnu' min as-sarf. There's two that return to the ma'na, six that return to the lafz. At a meta level, you can look at it that way. We want to break it down, you can diagram, right? So let's do a quick diagram, right? Just, so al-mamnu' min as-sarf, right? First you can say, there's one case which is عِلَّة واحدة تقوم مقام علتين. Right? The other is the case where you have وجود علتين. Right? So firstly we diagram it that you either have one illah that takes the place of two, which is coming. Right? Just one case. One which is one illah that takes the place of two illahs. That's coming. Or you have two far'i illahs. Here, what do you need? These. Right? You need one returns to what? That you have راجعة إلى ماذا؟ المعنى. Right? And one راجع إلى ماذا؟ إلى اللفظ. So broadly, there are الراجع إلى المعنى are two, which are al-Alamiyya and al-Wasfiyya. Right? And الراجع إلى اللفظ are how many? There's 6. Okay? So you can diagram it in this way, right? That you have علامتان, it's راجع إلى اللفظ, there's 2, and راجع إلى المعنى, راجع إلى المعنى are 2, راجع إلى اللفظ, there's 6. Just remember it in that way, and that's good enough. You have to have one of 2 and one of 6. If they're found together, you have al-mamnu' min as-sarf. And that's a sound way of diagramming. But you could also diagram it that with alamiyya, right? There are X number of cases, and wasfiyya, there's X number of cases, right? So, that's adding a little bit of nuance to it. Shaykh Muhyiddin Abdul Hamid here adds some nuance to it. So, right, because he tells us that with the alamiyya, right, all 6 are found, right? تأنيث بغير ألف، عجمة، تركيب، زيادة ألف والنون، وزن الفعل, and عدل. All 6 causes are found with alamiyya. With wasfiyya, 3 are found, right? زيادة ألف والنون, وزن الفعل, and عدل. So you could break it down in that way as well. There are 2 ways of diagramming. So all 6 secondary causes are found with alamiyya. So he gives examples. فمثال العلمية مع التأنيث بغير ألف. Right? This is excluding things like Lubna and Salma. That's a very common way of the Arabic feminine. Right? Layla. Right? A lot of them were the names of the beloved. And they're the names of the beloved, that's what people use it for. Some rationalize that Alif indicates yearning, but that's just there's no transmitted basis of that. But, right? Lubna, Salma, Layla, etc. all used as metaphors for the beloved too, but an example of alamiyya مع التأنيث with the feminine, with other than the alif, Fatima, عن فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, for example. Or in the hadith of Sayyidah Aisha, ما رأيت أحدا أقرب سمتا ولا دليلا ولا هديا برسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. من حرف جر, and her noble name there is in a place of jar. وعلامة جره فتحة ظاهرة في آخره. Right? Right? وزينب. Right? زينب. Right? وحمزة. Now the feminine is either in word and meaning or just in word, like in the form. So Hamza and Talha and in bunch of male names are feminine in their form. ولا عيب في ذلك. Names of great companions, right? Right? Are feminine. In what? لفظا لا معنى. Right? ومثال العالمية مع العجمة, being foreign. إدريس ويعقوب وإبراهيم. Right? ملة إبراهيم حنيفة. ملة to follow. ملة إبراهيم. مضاف إليه. But Ibrahim is, the word Ibrahim is in the place of jar bil idafa. وعلامة جره فتحة ظاهرة في آخره لأنه ممنوع من الصرف. Why is it ممنوع من الصرف? Because it's a alam, it's a definite name, plus عجمة. Then you have, and all the names of prophets, right? The names of the angel, Jibrila wa Mika, Mikaila, right? Israfila, right? All of them, because they're foreign names. Right? ومثال العلمية of the مع التركيب will it be this is this is a type of murakkab which is called murakkab murakkab masjid, right? It's murakkab like Ma'di Yakrib, name of a person actually from the companions of the Prophet Ba'labak, right? And there's a story behind that. If you're interested, you can look for it. Ba'labak. Now, of course, Ba'labak and Ba'labak is a place in Lebanon, and this and a number of other names tell us that when something is in tarkib, it takes it out from being prohibited. Many scholars, if you go to search just in the biographical dictionaries, look for al-Ba'labaki, there are literally hundreds of scholars who are Ba'labaki. Right? And which also raises a separate issue, but it's important to note that something whose origin is something impermissible, but it's no longer used in that impermissible way, it's no longer takes that original meaning. So for example, one of the madrasas of the Indian subcontinent is in a place called Deoband. Deoband is actually from Devi Band. Devi is one of the female goddesses of the Indian pantheon. And Band, is like a settlement. And they say that she was born in the forest behind that place. Then it'd be haram to say the word Deoband, or someone say they're Deobandi. No, because that's from another language. That's this type of tarkib. Right? And there's many other examples like that. Because now, like when you say Ba'labak, this indicates that when brought together, it no longer indicates its parts. It indicates a distinct meaning, which is the name of a city. So that same thing applies, for example, and we keep getting asked about this. Nike. What does the word Nike mean? What?
God of victory.
Yeah, it's a Greek god or goddess of victory. What does Nike? That's the original meaning. But al-ismu ma dalla ala musamma. But what does the name Nike now refer to? Refers to an athletic gear company, most famous for its shoes, but also athletic equipment and so on. It's not haram to have something that says Nike or that has that thing, because it's not that the dilala of this ism is not to that ma'na. They say Nike is referring to a company. And likewise, actually, same thing applies with symbols. And people ask about this frequently. But for example, many universities, many countries, in their coat of arms have the symbol of a cross on it. Is it haram for you to wear that? No. Because even though originally that part of the symbol refers to the affiliation to a church, but the symbol as a whole now, what is it pointing to? It is pointing to that college or that province or that country. It's not pointing to the symbol of to the religious symbol of so you could not put on a cross yourself. It's a major sin, yukhsha alayhi al-kufr. But if now we wouldn't advise it, but let's say someone puts on, and let's say they don't do it yourself, but Maulana Hamza Sahab is Imam of a masjid, and 4 members of the English cricket team come wearing the English uniform, and that has a cross. Now, is that cross indicating its primary indication there in the English flag, for example? Right? Is it indicating the Christian belief, or does it indicate, what does it indicate? It indicates the country. So now, of course, when it's the primary thing is the thing, one, if you can avoid it, that's certainly far better. But let's say that's the uniform of the work you work at. Right? You have to get rid of it? No. Is it a condemnable wrong? No. Because it's not impermissible. Right? If the best, let's say you're a broke student, the best deal you can find for a roller bag is from a company that has, the Swiss flag on it, which is a red, a white cross in red. Now that company's logo is not indicating now. Right? So, and of course, if you can avoid it, you cross it out, but sometimes not. Like so many European countries have that, but whatever like the countries that have crosses on their flags, does a resident of that country have to avoid those? No. Can you condemn it? No. You could at most give nasiha. So that's a separate point of benefit, right? Because it comes up from tarkeeb. Right? Qadi Khan. It's originally Qadi and Khan, but became murakkab, it's actually one word. Now, something shocking, just for those who are Hanafi amongst you, the fatwa of Qadi Khan are printed on the margins of the fatwa al-Hindiyya, which are actually called the fatwa al-Alamgiri, commissioned by Alamgir, Aurangzeb. Now, if you believe what's in the inside cover of the old printed edition, which has been reprinted countless times, but no one bothered correcting a fundamental error, Qadi Khan did great miracles. Why? Because it said that he died in the year 285 or 258 or something like that. But he's quoting scholars from the 3rd, 4th, and 5th century, and even early 6th century. And if he died 285 or whatever, that's a remarkable miracle that he's quoting people from future centuries. But he didn't. He died in 582 or something like that. So a basic principle, never believe what's on the cover of a book. Never believe what's on the inside cover of a book. Right? And in general, tathabbat, verify. Right? Because that's part of the wisdom of the preservation of our deen. They have all these weird things going on in the margins, right? When it comes to the transmission of books and stuff. But that is all a proof of the ilm being preserved, that despite wackiness, we can tell what's correct from what's incorrect without any doubt. Also, there's hikmah that you need the ulama. But when you quote, always verify, because scribes and publishers and editors they don't understand. They can assume that they have no clue what they're talking about. So you have to verify. Allah. Which is why there's a big debate in Islamic, in Muslim India, between one of the bastions of mainstream Islamic scholarship, Imam Abdul Hayy, Ibn Abdul Halim al-Laknawi from Farangi Mahal, and Siddiq Hassan Khan, who is one of the heads of the Ahl Hadith, the literalist movement. And he married the princess of Bhopal, a wealthy province at that time in India. So he was the Nawab of Bhopal. And they didn't get along. Ilmiya. So they each wrote 6 refutations of the other. Now Imam Abdul Hayy Laknawi was a faqih, Hanafi faqih, but a muhaddith, with great interest in history. He used to keep picking, and sometimes a bit pickishly, at Siddiq Hassan Khan for making errors in historical details. So Siddiq Hassan Khan made the mistake of saying, "Inni la altazimu sihhata fi al-naql." That when I quote, I'm quoting someone else. La altazimu sihhata fi al-naql. I don't hold myself to making sure that what I'm quoting is accurate. So then Imam al-Laknawi grabbed onto that. So in his books often said, وَهَذَا خِلَافًا لِبَعْضِ أَفَاضِلِ عَصْرِنَا. This is contrary to what some of the notables of our age, مِمَّنْ لَا يَلْتَزِمُ الصِّحَّةَ فِي النَّقْلِ, of who are from those who do not take care to verify their quotes. Said. And anyway. So, yes, Rama Hurmuz, same name of, and there's one of the great muhaddith, Rama Hurmuzi, right? Yani, or Buzur Jamhur, or Buzur Jamil, whatever. Rama Hurmuz. ومثال العالمية مع زيادة الألف والنون مروان عثمان غطفان عفان سبحان سحبان. And in the subcontinent, many people are known as Subhani. And they say it's actually Sahban, but people made it Subhan. Because literally Subhani means glory be to me. It's actually one of the ecstatic statements of one of the early Imams of the spiritual life. Subhani ma a'zama sha'ni. Glory be to me. How great is my affair. But this is called ala lisan al-haqq. As if he's quoting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's as if God declares at every moment, Subhani, glory be to me, how great is my affair. But it's an ecstatic statement. No one's allowed to utter these kind of things about themselves, obviously. So it's problematic. But Sahban, which is a classical Arabic name, Sufyan, Imran, Qahtan, Adnan, these are all mamnu' min as-sarf, alamiyya plus ziyadat alif wa nun. Why? Because the Arabs treated it as mamnu' min as-sarf. Now if you look at the larger books, they say, how does it have a resemblance to a fi'l? That's beyond our scope right now. ومثال العالمية مع وزن الفعل أحمد. Example of عالمية, of being definite with وزن الفعل. It takes one of the forms of the أفعال. أحمد. Right? So you say the joke that someone came to the bab, says من, and the person says أحمد, says انصرف, says go away. قال لا أنصرف لأني أحمد وأحمد لا ينصرف. Right? Said go away. Said no, I can't because my name is Ahmad and Ahmad لا ينصرف. It doesn't go away. Right? Because insarafa is to go away. ويشكر. Right? But yashkur when it's the name of someone. Right? And some people took on these interesting names, right? Or ushkur. Right? Taghlib, Taghlibu, and there's the name of a tribe. Tadmuru, right? It's like, so this wasn't fi'l, also prevents sarf. ومثال العالمية مع العدل. مع العدل, that it's considered to be the original form is if so. Umar is originally from Amir, right? Zufar is from Zafir, the great student of Imam Abu Hanifa. Said كان أقيس أصحابه. He was the most committed to following analogy, and he followed analogy over istihsan generally. It's very interesting. You can have a conspiracy theory about the Shafi'i school, right? That a high percentage of the positions where Abu Hanifa differs from Imam al-Shafi'i, you'll find Zufar with Imam al-Shafi'i. Actually, but it's technically the other way around, because Zufar came before Imam al-Shafi'i. Right? Right? Particularly those positions where Imam Abu Hanifa took istihsan, Zufar rarely did. And then, of course, fascinatingly, there's a noted and known minority of cases where the fatwa is on the opinion of Imam Zufar. And there's a number of people who wrote commentary. There's 18 principal issues and a number of derivative issues. Amongst them, Imam Abu Hanifa held that if you bought a dar, if you bought a residence, if you saw the sahna dar, if you just saw the entrance, the courtyard, it's enough. Then you don't have the option of what's called khiyar al-ru'ya, that fulfills the option of inspection. So you cannot refund it that, well, I didn't see it, it's not pleasing to me. In the time of Abu Hanifa, houses were tended, the general urf was houses were simple. So if you saw the Sahn al-Bayt, you could tell, is this a cheap, middle, or well-off house? The rooms would be the same. Actually, the position of Abu Hanifa and his companions. Zufar said no, rahimahullah, that you have to see all the rooms. لابد من رؤية البيوت, which is the ghuraf. And the fatwa is on the position of Zufar, said that هذا ليس اختلاف دليل وبرهان. It's not a اختلاف because of evidences and proofs, بل اختلاف عصر وزمان, time and age, right? الزفر وقثم وهبل, originally هابل, وزحل زاحل, جمح جامح, قزح قازح, مضر would be originally ماضر, right? And they put it in this form. It's one of the ways this sigat al-adl indicates it's a type of mubalagha. So Umar is more emphatic than Amir. ومثال الوصفية, so these are, so the Alabiyya manifests all the six of the signs going back to the lafz. The wasfiyya only manifests three. مثال الوصفية مع زيادة الألف والنون ريان. Right? One of the names for one of the gates of paradise, Rayyan. But Rayyan is also a wasf, something that is mubalagha from Rayy, of quenching thirst. Shab'an, right? But here Rayyan as a wasf, right? Shab'an, to be very full. Yaqdhan, to be very awake or very attentive. And you can say yaqid or yaqdhan, very awake literally, but meaning very attentive. ومثال الوصفية مع وزن الفعل, an example of something being a wasf with the wazn of fi'l, أكرم, أفضل, أجمل. These are all, looks like a fi'l, but it's actually an ism. Right? ومثال الوصفية مع العدل مثنى, it means 2 by 2. ثلاثة, رباعة, يعني أربعة, وأخر. So there are some literalists who said that men can marry 18 women. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Literally, مَثْنَى means 2 by 2, to keep count. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, marry whom you wish of women, مَثْنَى, 2 by 2. Keep count, please. وَثُلَاث, 3 by 3. وَرُبَاعَ, 4 by 4. Which would be 18. But it doesn't mean 2 plus 2 and 2 plus 3 and 3 plus 4 and 4, but rather it means 2 or 3 or 4. If you wish to go beyond 1, right? And that's why they say اختلاف الظاهرية لا يلتفت إليه. The difference opinion of the literalists, Imam Zahabi mentioned this, is not given consideration. Meaning, in those issues where they go outside the bounds of, the mainstream bounds of sound textual reasoning. Because they had aberrant methodology when it came to textual reasoning. Anyways. أما العلتان اللتان تقوم كل واحدة منهما مقام العلتين فهما صيغة منتهى الجموع. This is the maximal plural. وألف التأنيث المقصورة أو الممدودة, or the alif of تأنيث, المقصورة أو الممدودة. المقصورة without a hamza, الممدودة with a hamza. أما صيغة منتهى الجموع, this is the maximal plural, but sometimes جمع قلة and جمع كثرة. Some can have a plural indicating a small plurality and a large plurality, but what's the maximal plural or the plural of plurals? Right? فضابطها. Firstly, what is its criteria? Something being صيغة منتهى الجموع. أن يكون الاسم جمع تكسير. It's a broken plural. It's an ism. It's a جمع تكسير. وقد وقع بعد ألف تكسيره حرفان. Right? And after the alif of its taksir, there are two letters. نحو مساجد. Right? So there's an alif. So it's masjid, but this صيغة منتهى الجموع, there's an alif that's inserted as part of the taksir, زيادة, right? زيادة نقص or تغيير. So there's a زيادة of alif, but after it there's two huruf. Right? Masajid, masjid to masajid. After the alif, two letters. Minbar, plural, manabir. Ala manabira min nur. Like in the hadith. Upon minbars of light. Ala, harf jar, manabir, اسم مجرور, ممنوع من الصرف, علامة جره فتحة ظاهرة في على آخره. منابر. أفاضل. So فاضل, plural, أفاضل. There's an alif as part of the taksir, after which there are two letters. Amajid. So majid, someone of majesty or high rank. Amajid, those of high esteem and rank. Amathil. Hawa'id, plural of ha'id. Tawamith. Right? Oh, so this is one type of muntaha al-jumu'ah, the maximal plural. Oh, ثلاثة أحرف وسطها ساكن. Or there's three letters after the alif, the middle of which has a sukun. So miftah, its plural is mafatih. Right? Usfur, its plural is asafir. Right? So there's three letters after the middle one, because the ya by necessity has a sukun on it, effectively. Qindil, its plural is قناديل. This is صيغة منتهى الجموع. It has two cases. It has an alif in the broken plural, after which are two letters, or three letters, in the middle letter being a sukun, as given. أما ألف التأنيث المقصورة فنحو حبلى وقصوى ودنيا ودعوى. These are all considered ممنوع من الصرف, even though it's more of a theoretical thing because it doesn't appear anyways. Okay? Can you see the, من يعني حصلت على 100 دينار من حبلى. It's ممنوع من الصرف, but can you see the صرف on it anyways? But there's reasons the grammarians deemed it to be that way. أما ألف التأنيث الممدودة فنحو حمراء. Now, because both, they're both ألف التأنيث. In the مقصورة, you don't see it. The إعراب is effective, is مقدر. But in the ممدودة, because they're both ألف تأنيث, in the مقصورة it manifests. يعني حمراء. A woman who is reddish of countenance. دعجاء, حسناء, woman who is beautiful. بيضاء, كحلاء, ناقصاء, نافقاء, علماء, من علا. Of course, we'll see some rules. But ulama, thankfully, when you put a mamnu' min as-sarf in idafa to something else, why don't we say min ulama al-muslimin? Ulama, is it mamnu' min as-sarf or no? So you say hum ulama'u. They are ulama'u. We say min ulama al-muslimin. Why? Because in the idafa, the mamnu' min as-sarf, when it's in idafa like that, when it's the mudaf, it takes sarf, and he'll explain that, right? So huwa hum min ulama'il muslimin. Hum ulama'u, but hum min ulama'il muslimin, for example. فكل ما ذكرناه من هذه الأسماء وكذا ما أشبهها لا يجوز تنوينه. None of these and the like of them is not permitted. لا يجوز طبعا لغة. Right? شرعا you could butcher whatever you want, you're not sinful unless it has religious implications. Right? لا يجوز لغة تنوينه ولا يخفض بالفتحة. It's not الفتح with a فتحة نيابة عن الكسرة. نحو صلى الله على إبراهيم خليله. Right? على إبراهيم. Now this is where if you don't do i'rab when you're reading, you're lost. Right? And you in the Fatiha غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. And you're من الضالين. You're lost. There's ضلال موبق and there's ضلال غير موبق. And the ضلال غير الموبق is أخروي and دنيوي. Okay? So the misguidance is something that will take you to hell eternally, موبق. And there's غير موبق, which is ضلال of the believer. And that ضلال could be أخروي, the sinful believer, the believer who has bid'ah, etc., fisq. But there's also ضلال غير موبق دنيوي. You're lost in a relative worldly sense. It's not a spiritual big deal, but it's unbecoming the dignity of the believer. And it could have other harms, right? So sallallahu, many people say sallallahu Ibrahim khalilahu. Is that wrong? Is it wrong? No. Because it can be sallallahu ala Ibrahim, and you know the fi'l can be mahdhuf. So you can say sallallahu ala Ibrahim a'ni khalilahu. I mean his khalil. So if you said khalilahu, it's marfu' بفعل محذوف تقديره أعني. But this is not how Arabic is typically spoken. But so don't speak it like that. But don't be hastened to say someone is wrong, because there are makharij. Like you could technically say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. If you say that, now it's theoretically possible with the Basmala, because there's a janib of ta'abbud, you can't say that. Though it's valid linguistically. لا يجوز شرعا to say it. You say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That you can't say that. Right? There's some things you can't, because you can't. The jump cannot be with something that is implicit, but the nasb can be with something implicit. So there's, I think, 27 possibilities of how you can structure Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And the Hawashi of the Ajrumiyya, many of them, like, what's it called? Tashwiq al-Khilan on Sharh al-Ahlan, etc. They go into it. But it's a mental exercise. Anyways. نحو رضي الله عن عمر أمير المؤمنين. Right? May Allah be well pleased with عمر عن عمر, because عمر ممنوع من الصرف, أمير المؤمنين. Or عن, right? عن أمير المؤمنين أبي حفص عمر بن الخطاب. Right? Like in the full narration of the hadith, hadith of intention, for example, if you look at in the 40 Nawawi. فكل من إبراهيم عمر وعمر مخفوض لدخول حرف الخفض عليه وعلامة خفضهما الفتحة نيابة عن الكسر. There ممنوع من الصرف because of this فتحة, لأن كل واحد منهما اسم لا ينصرف. They're both اسم لا ينصرف. والمانع من صرف إبراهيم. Why is إبراهيم ممنوع من الصرف? العلمية والعجمة, because of the foreignness. والمانع من صرف عمر. Why is عمر ممنوع من الصرف? العلمية والعدل. Alamiya and Adl. Because it's considered to be originally Amir, it became Umar, and because the ismiya of it was shaken in that sense, it's one of the illas that the Arabs made منع من الصرف. وقس على ذلك الباقي, and you can make analogy on the rest. ويشترط لخفض الاسم الذي لا ينصرف بالفتحة أن يكون خاليا من ال. For the ism الذي لا ينصرف to be in khafd with fatha, one, that there not be an L. وأن لا يضاف إلى اسم بعده, and that it not be in a state of إضافة to an ism after it. فإن اقترن بأل أو أضيف خفض بالكسرة. But if it has an al before or it's in إضافة, its خفض is with كسرة. نحو قوله سبحانه وتعالى وأنتم عاكفون في المساجد. Right? في مساجد, but في المساجد. Right? When you're in i'tikaf in masjids. ونحن مررت بحسناء قريش. I have passed by the beautiful woman of Quraysh. And then there are exercises. This is the kind of thing that you are most in need of doing exercise. Other things are very straightforward. If you don't know mamnu' min as-sarf, like ma'a as-salam. Someone said they study the al-Ajrumiyya, they don't know mamnu' min as-sarf. Like, they should, على نفسه فليبكي من ضاع عمره. Right? Upon their own self, let cry those who wasted their lives. وليس له منها نصيب ولا سهم. And they have no share nor part of that knowledge. Because knowledge is these things that are subtle. Right? Obvious affirmations are not really knowledge. To say the sun is shining and you were walking outside, that's not knowledge. Right? Right? To say al-fi'l, that the mubtada is marfu'. Thank you. Right? Everyone knows that. Everyone says Zaydun qa'imun. And nobody, like you say, okay, word Zayd here, the Arabs refer to that as mubtada. And when it has dhamma, it's marfu'. So Zayd is marfu'. That's not ilm. Right? These are the things that, that test one. Right? We can make, like someone could do actually, like, إرشاد الطلاب إلى خبايا الأجرومية. Right? What are the خبايا of the أجرومية? الممنوع من الصرف, for example. Right? The استثناء, differentiating the حال and the تمييز. The munada. Right? The munada and the rulings it takes. Right? Those are the things that you know it or you don't. Right? Broadly in Arabic as well, the adad and how the adad works. And those are the tests, not Babel, like the rafa and the nasb, things like that. Right? Or to distinguish the adawat, the different instruments, is man a harf or is it an ism? Right? So we see the different categories, which are asma, which are huruf. Those are the subtleties. Right? And if someone were to test, those are the things that one tests on. Right? Because there's parrot knowledge. It's good to parrot it out. That's step one. But step two is فهم ما دق من الأمور, to know these precise points. Now there's one line of poetry that summarizes the alamat of the mamnu' min as-sarf. And you can find it in Shaykh Ali's commentary. You can also find it in Sharh of Ibn al-Ashmawi, right? And that's quite useful to memorize. It's one line of poetry. ركب وزد عجمة, right? And وأن في معرفة زن ورق فالوصف فالكمل. Sorry?
اجمع وزن عادلا أنف في معرفة ركب وزد عجمة فالوصف فالكمل.
Yeah, so in one line of poetry, it summarizes the points. So inshallah, we could share that with its explanation from any of the many of them mention it. It simplifies life significantly. Right? And those are useful mnemonic devices. So you have one line of poetry, and you know, but also diagramming it yourself helps, right? So illatain, two of this, two returning to illatain, one returning to the ma'na, and one returning to the lafz. Those that return to the ma'na are two: alamiyya and wasfiyya. And those returning to the lafz are 6. All 6 apply to the lafz. 3 apply to the wasf. That's it. Okay. So you can diagram it that you need number 1 illah returning to the ma'na, which is either alamiyya or wasfiyya. Then, with alamiyya, there are 6 possibilities returning to the lafz. When it comes to wasfiyya, there's 3 possibilities returning to the lafz. And you make that diagram very clear. And there's one case where a sign is found that takes the place of 2 signs, which is صيغة منتهى الجموع and what? ألف التأنيث المقصورة أو الممدودة. That's it. Okay. So this needs a little bit of practice, a little bit of review, a little bit of effort, but right? They say the ulama say there's something that need a little bit, a little time of effort or a lifetime of humiliation. Right? It's like, it just takes a little bit of time just to make dabt of it. If you have that, right? And these are like, the Prophet said, وَبَيْنَهُمَا الْحَلَالُ بَيِّنْ وَالْحَرَامُ بَيِّنْ. Now, the hadith explicitly relates to the halal and haram. But, dilalatan, the same thing applies in the الخطأ بين والصواب بين والخطأ بين. وبينهما أمور مشتبهات. And between what's clearly right to say and what's clearly wrong to say, there are مشتبهات. There are things that are confusing. لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. Most people don't know. فمن اتقى الشبهات فقد استبرأ لدينه. Of course, that's in the halal and haram, it relates to deen. But in speech, it relates to فقد استبرأ لسانه وفهمه فقد استبرأ كلامه وفهمه. Has safeguarded their speech and their understanding. ومن وقع في الشبهات وقع في الخطأ. Right? So one practical thing is, if you don't know how to say it in something confusing, say it in a different way. You don't know you forget masjid, أحب, just put an al, put it in idafa. Right? You don't know if any قناديل is ممنوع من الصرف or not, just put al-qanadil. Okay? Right? Like you do, someone said you have to speak in Fusha at the store. So you don't know if it's هل عندك قناديل or هل عندك قناديل. So you say هل عندك شيء, هل عندك شيء من القناديل. I put an L in it somehow. Right? Or just ask هل عندك من قناديل الشام. You put an إضافة. So you get out. But when you're don't, because if you understand the definition of kalam, صون اللسان عن الخطأ. And the purpose of nahu is to guard the tongue. So the rules you know clearly, apply them. The rules you know clearly that this is to be avoided. But what you're not clear about, don't stumble. Don't stumble. But then see it that this is a problem. I don't know how to apply this. You have to train yourself to think grammatically. بينهم أمور مشتبهات. The clearer you are, not just in the knowledge, but also the active application of the rulings of نحو. يعني العلم بقواعد يعصم مراعاتها, which protect when upheld. And when is the mura'at? When you speak. اللسان عن الخطأ في الكلام. So, how do you do it? Shaykh Muhammad Qaylish, Allah Azza wa Khair, there's three things. Take a deep breath, read ahead, make the i'rab of it, and only when you're clear, say it. And repeat. Majority of students, like when someone says, تفضل, they go, قال وللجسم علامتان. And why? Because they didn't read ahead. So they're going to stumble. Right? As the hadith of halal and haram makes clear. Right? كالراعي يرعى حول الحمى. Like the shepherd who grazes around the hima, like around protected lands. يوشك أن يرتع فيه. It's feared that they're going to fall therein. So if you don't know where the limits are, you're going to fall in them. Okay? So that race is halal and haram, but the بالدلالة أو الإشارة, it applies to speech as well. Of course, speech does not have next worldly consequences most of the time. It has worldly consequences. So the same principle is understood about speech. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Any questions? Go ahead.
So earlier the author mentioned that one of the names that are يعني ممنوع من الصرف هو اسم اللي فيه عجمة. Is there like a rule that would help us know which names are Arabic, which ones are not?
Yeah, sometimes it's tricky, and sometimes there's khilaf. Some things there's khilaf. Is this, like even some of the words in the Quran, is this in the Arabi or Ajami? Now, so it's of course one of the shubuhat used by non-Muslim polemicists about the Quran. So the Quran says that it's بِلِسَانٍ عَرَبِيٍّ مُبِينٍ, clear Arabic, but it has non-Arabic words, because those Ajami words are mu'arrab. They have been Arabized. Right? So is Jibreel an Arabic word? So it's Ajami mu'arrab. And in dictionaries they use this term. It's mu'arrab. It's become Arabized. But because of so Ujma means أصله غير عربي. Right? But it's an Arabic word. Like so in any language, there's language in part of its cultural and civilizational existence. It comes in contact with other languages and it takes off its words, but it brings them into, right? Like Spain is not called Spain. Like, what's the Spanish name for Spain? España. But it's Englishized, Spain, right? They took the word España, they put it into English, I like that. Okay? So there are some characteristics of Arabic words, but it gets tricky because one of them is that the sign is that the root is used in Arabic. Right? It's used in Arabic. So which gets tricky though, because Jibreel, for example, they say, well, it's from Jabr. But no, because the lam, the things that get added to a word, they're all summarized in one word, right? Sa'al, yeah. But is that a form of the Arabic? Where sarf helps. Is there a pattern? So Jibreel, is it from? With this addition, is that form an Arabic form? And they said no. So is there some root called Jabral? لا. And there isn't in Arabic, right? So that's one sign of ujma. Or knowing its origin, of course, to solve the problem. Or banafsaj. Right? Is there a root like this? Banafasa. Right? It could be khumasi, but it's banafsaja, yabnafsaju. There's no such. بنفسجا فهو هذا بنفسج وذاك بنفسج. There's no such root, right? So that's one of the signs. Like the Arabic words go back to roots. But it's thulathi, most typically, rubai. Khumasi are rarely more than that, right? That's one of the tests. Simple thing is keep dictionaries handy. Right? There's a few websites that have dictionaries, and that's an enriching. Used to be deeply on Shaykh Abdurrahman Kharsa. Always keep Mukhtar al-Sihah and al-Misbah al-Munir next to him. If you have to pick one dictionary to look something up, a lot of the ulama say, look it up in Mukhtar al-Sihah. Sorry, in al-Misbah al-Munir, al-Fayyumi, rahimahullah. It's brief, he always defines things. You need shahanahu bil-fawaid, even though it's one of the briefer dictionaries. Extremely beneficial. But Mukhtar al-Sihah, especially to do with the forms and the verbal patterns, etc. He said, in Babi, daraba. Right? So there's a lot there of the different forms and usages, right? So if one stuck to one dictionary, al-Misbah al-Munir, 2, Misbah al-Munir plus Mukhtar al-Sihah, had 4, if you want to fuzz it, is Al-Qamus al-Muhit for Faraz Rabbani, a little more tricky but very fruitful, and Maqayis al-Lugha of Ibn Faris. Maqayis al-Lugha is really rewarding, especially for Arabs, because he always goes, what does this root indicate? Right? So like Daraba says these 3 letters, they are an asl tadullu ala kada wa kada. What's the meaning from which all the other meanings emerge? Amazing. Now, because it's an early dictionary, like you're going to do something significant, like you're going to give a talk on it, confirm with some of the other dictionaries. Because Ibn Faris made a lot of ijtihad for Dua. And, so, generally, like he's overwhelmingly right, but sometimes he says controversial things. So it's just good to double check that, but practically it's an authority in the language. It's very, very beneficial. And the Arabs did amazing work when it came. Actually, not the Arabs. Most of it was non-Arabs. Right? Al-Qamus is by a non-Arab. Al-Mukhtar al-Sihah is by a non-Arab. Al-Razi, author Mukhtar al-Sihah. Qamus is by a Persian. Ibn Manzur was Ifriqi, author of Lisan al-Arab. It's rare to find great Arab. The Arab felt, we know this language, right? Although that's not fair, because there's great Arab grammarians and they're all Arab. Because the Arab, when it comes to it, is the one who has mastery of, who can speak the Arabic language, a basic Arab, or someone who has mastery of the Arabic language. Okay? But also, of course, when it comes to dictionaries, if one's reading Quran, keeping mufradat of Raghib al-Isfahani is deeply enriching, particularly when you come to key terms of the Quran. Right? That's extremely beneficial. Because Raghib al-Isfahani is not just an imam of Lugha, but he's also a great imam of the ethical dimensions of religion. One of the main sources of the Ihya is al-Dhari'a ila Makarim al-Shari'a of Raghib al-Isfahani. It's one of the 3 main sources of the Ihya. It's al-Dhari'a plus Qut al-Qulub plus the Risala al-Qushayriya. Right? And other books, but these are the 3 he mentions in the beginning of the Ihya. Similarly, when reading Hadith, al-Nihaya of Ibn al-Athir. What does this word mean? And you learn a lot. And these are Like if there's a word in hadith, and these things one can bookmark, and one can bookmark, and but make it a habit. And those are great. These are great blessed books, and the ulama have relied upon them because they're so accurate and precise. At a simpler level, with the language of Quran, to look it up in a tafsir, a reliable tafsir, language of hadith, look it up in a sharh of hadith. But the shuruh al-hadith, the thing is, or even tafsir, sometimes just give you the contextual meaning, which is good for the context, but you want to understand the word itself. Why? Because it comes up throughout so many other things. Like, what is the meaning of qunut? What is the meaning of? Because it says al-qunut huna al-qiyam. Al-qunut huna al-du'a. That won't tell you what does qunut mean in itself, right? Especially with the core vocabulary of the religion, well, that helps us with why do we do it? Not because we want to be sophisticated, but because أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. And what do they not get? Do they not? What's reflection? Reflection is going to the depths of the meaning. You know what the word means, right? What the word means. What does khushu' mean? So khushu' is reverence. No, but why is khushu'? Khushu'. What does khasha'a mean as opposed to khada'a? Right? And if you, to the extent that you're able to do that, you're able to reflect. And there's tools, pathways of reflection, but one of them is to know the meanings of the words. And that should be the intention of learning Arabic, like learning Nahu, learning Sarf, learning Balagha, right? Is Kamalul Iman.
Is there a definition of Alamiyya?
Yeah, definition of everything. Yeah, it's good. Look at it. But Alamiyya is that which, and to give a good definition to distinguishing Alamiyya and Wasfiyya. Okay? I'm almost certain that Ibn al-Ashmawi would do this kind of stuff. But, or look in Tashwiq al-Khilal. You can borrow my copy from my pile of mess.
For the three lafzi causes which don't occur with
No, speak in Arabic. Like, says the العلل الثلاثة مع الوصفية.
مع الوصفية.
And you can say the rest in English, but at least the terms refer to them in Arabic.
Which don't occur with yeah. Yes, so that's right. The three ma'aniya causes which don't occur with the wasfiyya, which are the ta'nith, bighr, alif, ajma, and tarkib. Is it because they don't ever?
No, that's not a way of asking a question. Yeah? That's again the negative question. That's very problematic. Is it because of A? That's not a question.